My name is Vikas. People used to call me Vikas the laborer, and I never minded it. Because being a laborer wasn't a matter of shame for me, it was my identity. I wasn't one of those who dream, rather, I was one of those who break their backs carrying bricks, sand, and cement to fulfill others' dreams. My father did the same, manual labor. When I was 7 years old, he started falling ill. One day he didn't go to work, and the next day his funeral procession left our home. That day was a long time ago, and today is enough. I don't remember when I was a child. Perhaps I never was. On the day of the funeral, a burden first fell upon my shoulders, and then that burden never left. There were only 4 people left in the house. My mother, my 2 younger sisters, and me. Mother cried until her eyes were swollen. But these tears did us no good. My sisters were young. I couldn't understand what to do or where to go. One day, Mother sat me in her lap. She stroked my head and said, "Now, you are both brother and father to your sisters." That was it. I dropped out of school. Before finishing matriculation, a shovel was in my hand. I would dig soil during the day. At night, I would collapse onto my bed like dirt. When other boys talked about their books, I would wish I had a pen in my hand, too. But I had a shovel in my hand and a slip of paper in my pocket with the contractor's phone number. Mother would often get a fever. Sometimes it felt like she would leave us behind. But she held on. She would just say, "I will stay alive until my girls are married off," and I would listen silently because I had nothing to say. One day a relative said, "Vikas, you are a young man now. Get married." I laughed and said, "Marriage? We barely have enough food for 3 meals a day. How would I feed a wife?" But time kept passing, and Mother started to worry. She found a girl, simple and quiet, who was the daughter of a poor family just like ours. I nodded in agreement, not from my heart, but out of responsibility. We were married, a small program, some simple clothes, and the start of a new life. My wife was very patient. She would do chores all day with my mother and sisters and never complain. Sometimes I wonder, how did I get such a woman? Perhaps it was my father's blessings. Making ends meet was difficult. I did odd jobs. Sometimes I got paid, sometimes I didn't. Many days I would return home empty-handed. Mother would silently turn off the stove. My wife would take out 2 rotis and say, "You eat. I have already eaten in the afternoon." I knew she was lying, but I would remain silent. My sisters had dreams in their eyes, but I could not afford the price of those dreams. Every day their eyes would question me, and I would look away. I felt like I was a criminal to everyone, although I had never done anything wrong other than being born into poverty. Sometimes at night, when everyone fell asleep, I would quietly look at the sky and say, "God, I never ask you for anything. But today I am asking, just give me a little bit of peace." But there was only silence all around. The next day I would head out for work again. Whenever I saw my wife, she would be in some corner of the house stitching my sister's clothes or massaging my mother's feet. She never asked me for jewelry or bangles. She only said it once. "If God gives us a child, then I don't need anything else." I nodded my head, as if I had listened to her, but there was a fear in my heart. If God never gives us a child, will this woman still stay with me? But the conviction in her eyes would silence all my doubts. I had no dreams, only responsibilities. I had buried myself alive, like a person who is breathing but is not alive. Sometimes when I got my wages after work, I would stare at the money and wonder, is this life? Is this my destiny? But I did not give up. Not for my mother, not for my sisters, and not for the wife who would wait at the door for me every night and, first thing in the morning, wash my clothes and dry them in the first rays of the sun. Slowly, 2 years of marriage passed by. The eyes of our relatives began to change. Earlier they used to ask, "Is there any good news?" Now they say, "Have you had any treatment or not?" One day a woman from the neighborhood taunted my wife, "Perhaps it is not written in your fate to become a mother." My wife did not cry that day, but the next morning she said to me, "Vikas, find a good doctor somewhere. Maybe treatment will help." I nodded my head. The following week I took her to a famous doctor in the city. They gave some medicines. I got some reports done right there. A few months passed, but there was no change. Then someone mentioned a shrine where people's prayers are answered. We went there. My wife walked there barefoot. She bowed her head at the threshold. When we returned, she said it felt like her heart had lightened. I just said this much: God will make everything right. Then 4 years passed. In the 4th year, we went to a doctor in a big city. He did a complete checkup of my wife. The reports went on for several days. Finally, he called us in and said everything is fine. It is just a matter of time. We returned with hope. But that time seemed to have stopped like cold iron. My wife loved every child in the neighborhood. If any child came by, she would hand them something or other. I once saw her buying children's books. I asked, "Who are these for?" She replied, just like that, "Maybe they'll be useful." In the 6th year, mother's health deteriorated significantly. I became extremely busy. Doctors, medicines, the hospital. Meanwhile, my wife had started treatment with a doctor on her own. When I found out, I angrily said, "Why are you getting treated by so many people, Mom?" She just said this: "Maybe God has placed a miracle in someone's hands that might give us our child." In the 7th year, I lost the smile from my wife's face that used to appear at the smallest joy. She would make tea, clean the house, and then go to the roof to stare at the sky. I would often watch her from below and wonder if she talks to someone up there. In the 8th year, she went to a holy man who claimed that an amulet would fix everything. I brought the amulet and hung it on the wall. I dissolved the powder he gave in water and made her drink it. A few days later, my wife said, "Vikas, perhaps it is not in my destiny to be a mother." I said, "God is greater than destiny. He will grant it when the time comes." In the 9th year, talks of my sister's marriages began. But people would ask, even after so many years, "The brother has no children yet." They would act as if this were some great flaw. Haro. I would shake my head in denial and they would turn away. One day, returning from the market, my wife cried on the way. A woman asked her, "Where is your child?" And she remained silent. When she returned home, I saw that her eyes were red. I couldn't say anything. I just gave her a glass of water. She drank it quietly and went to sleep. By the 10th year, conversation between us had dwindled. Now it was the same old routine. Work in the morning, silence in the evening, and every night a question that stayed in our eyes but never reached our lips. But one night something changed. I was sitting on the terrace. She came and sat beside me and remained silent for a long time. Then she asked, "Vikas, if we aren't destined to have children, will you ever think that it's my fault?" I said, "No, you are. My entire world." She smiled a little and said, "Then let me live with the power of prayer. Maybe a miracle will happen." I looked at her. The first time it felt like prayer really is a form of hope. Not medicine, but more powerful than medicine. We both looked up at the sky together that night, as if it were the first time we both had asked for something. The desire for a tiny laugh, for small footsteps that would break our silence. Then came a morning. Everything seemed quite ordinary. I was putting on my shoes to leave for work when my wife said, "Vikas, please pick up a few things from the market on your way." I looked up in surprise. She seemed a bit nervous. I asked, "Is everything okay?" She avoided my gaze and said, "Yes, it's just that I'm feeling a bit unwell." That day passed. The next day, she wasn't feeling well either. When I returned in the evening, she had a report in her hand. I was returning from work, drenched in sweat. She was standing at the door. She was smiling. She placed the report in my hands. I looked at her with questioning eyes. She began to say, "You are going to be a father." It felt like bells were ringing in my ears, as if flowers had bloomed on the ground for me. There were flowers beneath my feet. I looked at the paper again as if I couldn't believe it. She was laughing and I was watching her in silence, as if a dream had come alive before my eyes. I couldn't say a single word in that moment. I just stepped out and went straight to the temple. I bowed my head there and sat with folded hands for a long time. The priest placed his hand on my shoulder. "Everything is fine, Vikas." I stood up. There were tears in my eyes. I just said this: "God has listened to me today." On my way back, the first thing I bought was fruit for my wife. Then I gave 5 rupees to 2 children in the neighborhood. That joy was no less than a treasure to me. I went to work the next day, but my heart remained back at home. I asked the contractor for time off in the afternoon. He asked the reason. I said, I am going to be a father. He smiled. He took a 500 rupee note out of his pocket. This is for sweets from me. That evening I bought sweets from the neighborhood shop. 2 kilos of barfi, half a kilo of lattice, and some jalebis. The shopkeeper asked in surprise, what's the occasion today, Vika's brother? I said, my prayers have been answered. He didn't quite understand, but happiness was dripping from my face. I went to every house in the neighborhood and distributed sweets. Some asked nothing. Some said that they had just received blessings. When my mother saw the sweet box, her eyes widened. Vikas, are you telling the truth? I nodded my head. She said, thank God. He finally listened. Now taking care of my wife's health became my life's purpose. I would get her checked up every week. Fruits, milk, and a good diet. One day my wife said, Vikas, don't spend so much. There is still plenty of time. I said this time is the most precious of all. I didn't want to waste even a single moment. I had started saving money. I had started setting aside a portion of every day's wages. I would spend only on essentials. I started getting by with old clothes. My expenses had reduced significantly. But now there was more happiness on my face. At night while sleeping, I would place my hand on my wife's belly and drift off happily. One day she asked, what are you thinking about? I said, I am wondering what our child will be like. Like you or like me. She started laughing. Whoever they resemble, they just need to be healthy. May God make everything else go well. Slowly the months went by. Every month's report was tied to my heartbeat. Sometimes minor weakness, sometimes dizziness, but we both had become stronger than before. Relatives who used to taunt us earlier now started coming to offer congratulations. Many people raised their hands in prayer as if the burden on their hearts had also lightened. In the 7th month, I bought a small, comfortable chair for my wife. Sitting on it, she began knitting sweaters, tiny sweaters, little socks and caps. One day I asked her, so soon? She said, I just can't wait. I also bought a small chest. I started keeping things for the baby inside it. A small cradle, some clothes, toys. The neighbors showered us with heartfelt blessings. Some even gave us old things. For me, it was no less than a precious treasure. By the 9th month, every corner of my home was filled with smiles. My mother would stay awake at night praying to God. My sisters, who used to be quiet, were now thinking of new names for the baby. Then the day I had been waiting for years finally arrived. When my wife's labor pains began, I took her to the hospital immediately. It was a winter morning. The sun hadn't even fully risen yet. Mother was sitting before God, praying. My sisters were nervous and I myself couldn't understand anything. I was just pacing back and forth outside the hospital. 2 hours later, the nurse came out. There was a smile on her face. Congratulations. It's a boy. As soon as I heard this, it felt like an electric current ran through my body. I rushed toward the door immediately. But the nurse stopped me. Please wait for a while. Cleaning is underway. I leaned against the wall and stood there. My hands were trembling. My eyes were brimming with tears. After a while, I was allowed to go inside. When I entered the room, my wife looked weak. There was a strange radiance on her face. Beside her lay the little child, all wrapped up. A pinkish face, black hair, breathing a beautiful, living reality. I gently touched his tiny hands. He moved slightly with a little effort and then fell back into a peaceful sleep. My wife said, look, he resembles you, doesn't he? His nose is exactly like yours. I said, his tiny hands are just like mine too. Look. In that moment, I felt as if the world had stood still. As if all those years of waiting and suffering were endured just for this one moment. I called out to the nurse, is there a sweet shop nearby? She laughed, already? I said, yes, already. Because my son has stepped into this world. The next day, upon returning from the hospital, we had a small welcome. Sweets, milk, and those clothes that my sisters had stitched. When Mother took the baby in her arms, she sat there quietly for a long time, kissing his forehead. There was a strange light in my sister's eyes, as if a new relationship had entered their lives too. I named my son Rahul. Everyone started calling him by this name. When I went to work, I would call repeatedly to ask if Rahul had his milk or if he was crying. My wife would often laugh and say, Take care of yourself more than your son. Focus on your work. I would say that I am working just for him. When I got paid for my daily labor, I would definitely bring something for my son. Sometimes a small toy, sometimes a milk bottle. I felt that these were not just things, but my love that I was showering on him. Between home and work, my responsibilities had increased. When I left for work in the morning, the sun hadn't even fully risen. On my return in the evening, I wouldn't even get a moment to stretch my back. Medicine for my wife, medicine for my mother, small things for my sisters, everything was beyond my budget and time. But I never stopped. One day I overheard my sisters talking. Our age is slipping away. If it were in Vika's brother's power, we would be married too. Mother was sitting quietly. Perhaps she had a lot in her heart, but not on her lips. When I spoke to my wife at night, she said that after our child, we must think about them too. We must say. Otherwise there will be bitterness in their hearts. The next day I started saving money separately for my sisters' marriages. But with medicines, child's expenses, and rations, everything was already barely manageable. I then started doing some extra work. 2 days a week, night shifts and odd jobs on Sundays. My only hope was that everything would be arranged soon. My Muna had turned 6 months old, and I would be surprised to see how time had flown by on wings. He had started smiling. Holding my finger, he would make soft sounds. Just one smile of his would wash away all my fatigue. One day when I came home, I saw my sister sitting in a corner crying. Mother told me that someone refused to even consider the marriage proposal. They said that the mother is sick and the brother has too many responsibilities, and he already has a wife and child. I fell silent. There was nothing left to say. I couldn't sleep that night. But hearing Rahul's laughter in the morning, it felt as if God was telling me not to lose hope. There is still a lot left to do. Rahul's 5th birthday was very simple. No celebrations, no line of guests. Just me, my wife, mother, and my 2 sisters. We cut a small cake. Rahul blew out his candles himself for the first time. There was applause. We offered prayers, and his laughter lit up every corner of the house. Then a fog seemed to settle in. A few days later, Rahul complained of a cough at night. I thought the weather had changed. This often happens with children. My wife checked his fever. It was mild. We gave him steam with neem leaves. It's an old remedy that had worked many times before. By the next morning, the fever had spiked. He was also breathing heavily. I took him to a nearby clinic. The doctor said, "It's a minor virus. I am prescribing medicine. You will see a difference in 2 days. 2 days passed. There was no improvement. On the 3rd night, Rahul's breathing became rapid. My wife started screaming and crying. Vikas, he isn't able to breathe. I sat up in a panic. Carrying him in my arms, I rushed back toward the clinic. In the dark of night, the doctor used a nebulizer. After a while, his breathing eased a bit. I asked, "Is this just a common cold and fever?" He said, "It seems like that, but please be a little careful. If this happens again, take him to a bigger hospital." I nodded, but something inside me was breaking. A few days passed peacefully. Rahul started laughing again. He began to run a little, but he wasn't his old self anymore. My wife would often say, "Vikas, he is not the same as before." I would reassure her. The body gets weak after a fever. The medicine must be working slowly. Then a week later, there was a call from school. "Your child has fainted in class. Come immediately." I rushed there. There was a flush on Muna's face. He was sweating as if he had been running. I picked him up in my arms. Half opening his eyes, he said, "Papa, I can't breathe." I took him straight to a better hospital. A young doctor there examined him. He ordered some tests and said, "It seems there's an issue with his airways." He prescribed medicine. He will be better in a few days. I sat silently for a long time. My wife came close to me, looked at Rahul, and said, "Why doesn't he seem like he used to? He used to talk and play all the time. Yeah. But now he just stays lying down all the time." I gave no answer to my wife. I just kept my hand on Rahul's head. He was murmuring something in his semi-sleep. After this, I knocked on the door of every doctor nearby. Everyone offered a new medicine and new prescription. I would bring home a bag of medicines, and every time my wife would ask, "Will this medicine work this time?" I was starting to get tired. I couldn't focus on my work. Only one thought crossed my mind. What is happening to my child? He was getting weaker, day by day. Picking him up used to feel like play before. Now it started to feel like a burden. His legs would dangle. His arms were becoming thin. One day my wife said, Vikas, why aren't we going to a big hospital now? Now. You can see that the treatment here is not doing anything. I remained silent. When I didn't have much, going to a private hospital meant thousands of rupees. And I only had a little bit of money. But the very next morning, something happened that pulled the ground from under my feet. Rahul suddenly developed a very high fever. He was gasping for air and was so weak that he didn't even have the strength to sit upright. My wife started screaming while changing his clothes. Vikas, what is happening? He cannot even take 2 steps. I decided right then, no matter what, I have to take him to the city's big hospital. I gathered all the money available in the house. I kept my wife's old bangles. I apologized to my sisters and, picking up my son in my arms, headed towards the hospital, headed to our. On the way, Rahul's eyes started to close. I patted his cheek. Rahul, look, Papa is here with you. The doctor auntie will make you better soon. Just have a little more patience. He gave a weak smile, as if he were trying to give me strength. The city was still far, but my heart had only one prayer. Just let him stay awake until we reached the hospital. It was evening by the time we reached the city hospital. Rahul's body was drenched in sweat. His breathing was so labored as if every breath was lifting a stone. He lay unconscious in my wife's lap, and my eyes were fixed on the gate, where permission to enter was tied to registration and a fee. When we reached the main gate, papers were filled out there. He was shown to the doctor. The nurse immediately took Rahul to the emergency room. We both were sitting outside. Our breaths were held. Our hearts were in our mouths. After a while, the doctor came out. His face was serious. He said, "We have checked him. He must be admitted immediately. There is a blockage in his heart valve. He needs an immediate operation." My wife grabbed the doctor's arm and asked, "Will he survive?" Lowering his eyes, the doctor said, "If he gets treatment on time, yes, but if there's a delay, we cannot say anything." The doctor wrote an amount on a piece of paper and gave it to me, along with a pharmacy slip. I took the slip in my hand and looked at it, as if it were a piece of dynamite. My eyes kept staring at that amount, which was more than my entire year's earnings. My wife asked, "What does it say?" I hid the slip. "I need to get some medicine. You sit here. I'll be right back." When I left the hospital, the path seemed blurry. Cars were moving at their own pace on the road. People were busy in their own race, and I was in a race with no end in sight. First, I went to my contractor. He listened and expressed his regret. "Vikas, you know that salaries are held up this month. I am running on debt myself." I got up silently. I went to a shopkeeper I knew in the market. He was an old acquaintance. He had given me goods on credit many times. This time he said, "Vikas, brother, my heart wants to help, but last time it took you 6 months to return the money." I let out a sigh. This time my child will die. Even then, would 6 months be enough? He lowered his gaze, but there was no money. After that, I knocked on many doors in many alleys. One said my children are also sick. Another said I have to buy medicine for my father. No door could become a source of hope. My wife called Vikas the doctors, asking about the arrangements for the money. I said, "I am on my way. Something will work out." I paused for a moment and thought, should I go to a relative? But these are the same people who even denied the relationship with my sister. Why would they give money? Still, I went. I reached my maternal uncle's house. I rang the bell. The door opened. They listened, expressed regret, and said, "This is all God's will. Pray, everything will be all right." I said, along with prayers, "Medicine is needed, but I don't have the money for it." He said, "It's my daughter's wedding. Expenses are very high." I let out a faint laugh. Then my son was perhaps not in my destiny. He fell silent. I turned away from the door. Now the only one left was Mom. I called her. "Mom, mortgage your jewelry or belongings. I need the money from someone." Then a voice said, "Son, there are some things from your father's time. I'll check. Maybe something might be of use." I kept running around until late at night. I bought medicines with whatever little money I could gather. I reached the hospital and the nurse said, "Sir, The amount must be deposited by tomorrow." My wife didn't ask anything. She just kept stroking our son's head. His breaths were labored just as before, as if each moment he wanted to free himself from some prison. I sat there in silence. The sun rose in the morning. I had realized that now only a miracle could save my son, or a hand that would help without questions. And that hand hadn't appeared yet. Until the last hours of the night, I kept walking aimlessly in the hospital gallery. The doctor's words were echoing in my mind. "If the amount doesn't arrive by tomorrow morning, we won't be able to do anything." My wife was sitting in a corner. With our son's head in her lap, I was in a battle for which I held no weapon. It was about to be morning. As the light began to push away the darkness, my heart began to sink even further. I forced myself out of the room. I went to the parking lot and sat on a bench. Cold winds were brushing against my face. That's when I remembered that Dad's old weapon was lying at home. It was once kept for protection. Now the need was something else. I told my wife I was going to arrange for the money. "Don't you worry." She said nothing. Perhaps she too had given up hope for a miracle. I sat in an auto rickshaw and went straight to the village. I reached the storeroom. I opened the old wooden cupboard. I took out the object wrapped under some clothes. When I held it, my palm trembled. Dad's voice echoed in my ears. "Only pick this up when absolutely necessary. Otherwise, this thing never saves a life, it ruins it." I closed my eyes. I convinced myself, "Dad, this time has gone beyond necessity now." I wrapped it in a cloth, put it in my pocket, and left for the city. Reaching the start of the road, I stopped at the roadside. Sounds of prayers were coming from the temple. People were coming and going. But I stood by the road, settling the accounts of my fate. I kept watching the passing vehicles, as if waiting for some sign. A little later, a white car appeared, moving at a slow speed. Money. Inside there was a woman and a driver. I signaled for it to stop. The car stopped. The driver rolled down the window. "Brother, I need a lift. It's a huge emergency." The driver was about to say something when the woman in the back said, "Let the poor man in. Who knows what struggles he's facing?" I sat in the front seat. The car started moving. I sat there in silence. After going a little distance, I slowly pulled a pistol from my pocket and pointed it straight at the driver. "Look, stop the car." The driver panicked and hit the brakes. The woman screamed, "What are you doing, brother?" I turned back and said, "Give me everything you have. Jewelry, money, whatever it is, hurry up." The woman folded her hands. "For God's sake, I have nothing at all. All this money is for my daughter's treatment. She has a brain injury. I am on my way to the hospital right now." I said in a harsh tone, "I don't care what is happening. To you, you. My son is also in the hospital right now, and his heart valves have failed. He is dying." The woman's voice began to tremble. "I sold everything to gather this money. If I don't reach in time, my daughter won't survive. Please have mercy on us." I roared at her. "That's enough, I've heard it. Give me the briefcase." When the driver tried to say something, I yelled at him, "If you speak, I will finish you right here." I didn't even look back once. At gunpoint, I sat behind a biker and told him to ride at full speed. I got off midway and ran quickly toward the hospital. At that moment, I couldn't hear anything. Only one thing was echoing in my heart. My Rahul must be saved. My son must be saved. In the same city on the same day, 2 children were near death. To save one, I had snatched away the other's hope. I had realized this, but perhaps it was too late to realize anything. As soon as I reached the hospital, I rushed to the emergency window. I put the bag on the table and, panting, said, "I have brought the money." Informed the doctor immediately. The nurse looked at me with surprise. She took the slip, looked at the bag, and immediately picked up the phone. The doctor came 2 minutes later. He checked the papers, looked at the payment receipt, and said, "All right. We are taking the child to the operation theater immediately." I turned toward my wife. She was repeatedly stroking our son's face with love. The doctor said, "Now you all wait outside." With tears in her eyes, my wife placed her hand on our son's forehead one last time, and he went inside with the nurse. We were both sitting on a bench outside the door, watching the hospital scene. The sound of footsteps, the groans of patients, it all felt like movie sounds, and we were just frozen in a scene. 4 hours passed by. With every passing minute, my heart rate kept increasing. I went and sat in the corner. of the hospital temple once again. I had forgotten how to ask for anything. I just sat there in silence with my eyes closed. Then suddenly, a nurse called out, "Bikaji, the doctor is calling you." My heart felt like it jumped into my throat. I ran towards him. The door opened and the doctor was smiling. "Congratulations. The operation was successful. Now the child just needs to rest in the ICU for a few days to recover fully." I just kept staring without blinking. Words were stuck in my throat. My wife arrived behind me. She heard the doctor and immediately started thanking God. Our whole world was wrapped in that one piece of news. Our son had survived. The next few hours, I kept meeting people outside the room. I kept consoling my wife and thanking God. My heart wanted to do something so that others could share in this happiness. In the afternoon, I bought 5 kilos of sweets from a shop near the hospital. On the way back, I called out to every passerby,